This is an overview of the second midterm study guide. There are 4 questions, one each from chapters 9, 10, 11, and 7. The first question is from chapter 9. Define social stratification and explain how open and closed systems of stratification work. So remember, you're always giving the detail. Define social stratification, but then explain the two different systems. Open systems of stratification, which is what we have in the US, and closed systems of stratification. And remember, give an example in your discussion of each one of these. Discuss the functionalist, conflict, and symbolic interactionist perspectives on social stratification. Provide examples for each perspective. Again, in your discussion, tell me how functionalist theorists analyze social stratification. Remember, it's not a surprise that functionalist theorists think that there are some positive things that happen for society as a result of social stratification. Remember the work of Davis and Moore. You should talk about that. And of course, you should give some examples of how society benefits from social stratification. From a conflict perspective, remember they're looking at the negative things that occur, so you're going to want to explain what those negative things are and at least give an example or two. Same thing for symbolic interactionist perspective, looking at how do we perceive others in society based on what we perceive their social class to be. The way people dress, the way they talk, the kind of car they drive, and how are people treated based upon what we perceive their social class to be. Remember, we cannot always tell someone's social class just by what kind of car they drive or how they dress. There are many people walking around who are well-dressed and who drive nice cars, but who are heavily in debt. So looks aren't everything. Explain the difference between absolute and relative poverty. So there are two different measures of poverty, absolute and relative. In the US, we use the absolute measure. And after you explain the difference between these two types of poverty, and of course you give an example of each, tell me which one we use, and also tell me if you think this is the appropriate measure to use, and provide at least one reason for your opinion, okay? And remember, don't just say, because it creates inequality, or because poor people stay poor. That tends to be true, but how? Give me an example of how that works. Don't just make a statement and think that I can read your mind. Question 2, discuss how the functionalist, conflict, and symbolic interactionist perspectives view racial and ethnic relations in the US. Okay, so again, functionalist theorists are looking for something positive, something beneficial. Conflict theorists are looking at what are some of the negative things. Symbolic interactionist theorists are looking at how do we interact based on how we perceive someone's race or ethnicity to be. Again, in that discussion, you're telling me how these theories each analyze racial and ethnic relations, and you're also giving me examples, right? You're not just making statements, you're supporting them. That's an important thing because I cannot read your mind. I cannot know what you mean unless you tell me what you mean. Choose two groups discussed in section 11.5 in the textbook. I don't use page numbers because this is an online free resource. So just scroll down till you find section 11.5 and summarize at least 3 critical parts of their history in the US and the status of these two groups today. So remember, there are several groups that are discussed in section 11.5. You're only choosing 2 groups, and then you are giving me 3 critical parts of their history. And again, not just a list, but explain what happened during those 3 critical parts of their history and what is the status of these 2 groups today. Question 3 is from Chapter 10. Define the Gini coefficient and the Human Development Model and explain how these are used to measure inequality. So remember, two different ways to look at global inequality: Gini coefficient, Human Development Model. Make sure that you review these in full so that you can explain them fully and give me some examples of how these are used. Explain the three types of nations in Wallerstein's world system approach. Okay, so make sure you're not just listing them, but you're explaining them, right? You're giving me the details about each of those three types. Do wealthy nations, like the US and other Western nations, have a moral or ethical duty to support or to assist developing countries? Support your opinion with two examples. This is just your opinion. Maybe you say yes, maybe you say no. There are many people in the US who say, no, we don't. That's their issue, not ours. Let's fix our problems first. Maybe you're one of those people. Fine. Explain to me why. Give me two examples about why you think that that is true. If you're on the other side, like me, and you believe that the US and other wealthy nations have a moral or ethical duty, then give me two reasons. Question number 4, define deviance and explain why it is sometimes difficult for people to agree about what constitutes deviance. Remember that deviance, unlike crime, isn't always easy to define. Crime is easy. If it's in the criminal code, if it's in the penal code, bam. If it's in there, we know that if you do that thing that's prohibited, then you've committed a crime. Deviance, of course, is different because it's really based on how a society constructs the meaning of deviance. Deviance, like race and ethnicity, is socially constructed. What we consider to be deviant in the US might not be deviant in another country, and vice versa. What one ethnic group might consider deviant, another ethnic group might not. Also keep in mind, changes over time. Something that we 50 or 100 years ago thought was deviant behavior, today maybe not so much. Think about how in the 1930s going all the way through until the early 2000s, most people were taught through DARE or other anti-drug programs in school that all drugs are bad. However, many people today use marijuana or cannabis recreationally and medicinally, and many states allow that. They allow both of those things. There are also some therapists are using ketamine and LSD to help people who have suffered trauma and who have PTSD. How we think about things is constantly evolving. So make sure that you're giving me some examples about why it's sometimes difficult for everyone to agree what is deviant behavior and what is not. Explain in detail the three perspectives on deviance, and we always know what those three perspectives are, and provide one example for each. Okay, so how do functionalist theorists view deviance? An example. How do conflict theorists view it? An example. How do symbolic interactionist theorists view it? An example. Do you believe social class and race affect how well a defendant is represented in a criminal case? Provide two examples. All right, again, that's just your opinion, but I want you to support your opinion with two examples. That's it. As you know, I'm a strong believer that if you prepare, the fact that you have these questions to prepare with should mean that you should be able to write some pretty thorough answers. Don't leave it till the last, I urge you, because after this week, we've only got another 2 weeks. So we're almost finished with this class. Hang in there.